Hey everybody, today you are absolutely in for a treat. You get an opportunity to hear this interview that I had the privilege to have with Mr. Joe Hart. He is the current CEO of Dale Carnegie and Associates, and as you know, this organization has had a tremendous impact on me. I credit it 100% with any success professionally I've had. Dale Carnegie program fundamentally changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to take the methods, models, and structures and develop in an exponential way. It gave me the space to be able to look back and create my mentorship philosophy. The example that Dale Carnegie himself set through his methodology and his philosophy and the books he wrote, and frankly the life that he lived, is one of my greatest and biggest inspirations in my life, and many of the most influential and the most influential mentors that I've ever had have been Dale Carnegie people. And I love this organization. It is what I live and breathe, and I am so excited to bring this interview to you. I get an opportunity to talk to Joe about things like mentorship and Dale Carnegie and some current research that has just been released. In fact, as you're listening to this, today is December the 6th, and I am right now as this is being released, I'm driving down to South Carolina, to the Charleston area, to attend a 3-day Dale Carnegie National Convention. So if you'd like to see what some of that looks like over the next 3 days, if you're listening to this in that time frame, I'll be publishing out lots of content and lots of stuff on Snapchat. So if we're not connected there, let's connect at Doug Stewart 919. Would love to connect with you there. Also, Doug Stewart 919 at all the other various social media places. But so that I don't hold this thing up anymore, please enjoy this interview with Mr. Joe Hart. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Doug. Great to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So the first thing that I'd like to jump into is just give me an understanding of how does a lawyer, because you have a law background, how does a lawyer become the CEO of a company like Dale Carnegie Training?
Well, thank you for the question. It's interesting because it's been a long and winding path that I never would have anticipated would have led me here. Mm-hmm. So when I became a lawyer, I went straight through from college to law school to practicing law with a pretty significant firm in Detroit, and that was my dream. Mm-hmm. So even when I was in high school, I was going to go to a great college, and then I was going to go to a great law school, and I was going to go get a great job, be a partner, and that was it, Mm-hmm. And then I took a Dale Carnegie course in 1995. Wow. I started practicing law in 1993, and so there were different things in the law that I really didn't like. I wasn't feeling all that fulfilled. At the same time, a lawyer looks at having made an investment in law school, studying for a bar exam, and that type of thing. So I felt like I'm just going to keep on doing this. And then I took this Dale Carnegie class. And part of what it did, it just really blew me away in a number of ways. Part of it was around vision. Part of it was around confidence and being courageous and basically and being bold. Part of it was around interpersonal skills and just really helping me develop empathy. But the long and short of it is the Dale Carnegie course led me to leave the practice of law. And at that point, I went into real estate, and I joined one of the top real estate development companies in the country, a company called Taubman, which develops large regional shopping malls. And they took me through an executive rotation program, going through different parts of the business. And I was fortunate and grateful to advance very quickly through that company, and I'd become a director of development in a pretty short time. I was the youngest director of development at this publicly traded company, so I was really excited about that. And at the same time, that Dale Carnegie course had become really a part of who I was. So what happened, Doug, was after I took the course, I had said, I need to make sure I'm applying the principles that I've learned. So I developed a system for doing that. And that started in 96. And I just did that for a couple of years. And then I had talked to a lawyer who suggested that I contact Dale Carnegie and tell him about what I was doing, and ultimately developed a concept for a product that I talked to the CEO of Dale Carnegie about, and we decided to do a. And this is all happening, parallel path to the job that I had that I really enjoyed. So ultimately, I decided to develop a business plan. And while I was working at the Taubman Company, working as hard as I could there, weekends, nights, I was working on a business plan for this company. And in 2000, actually 99, I started to talk to potential investors about this, and people loved the concept. The concept was an e-learning company. And there are lots of times that we will take a program, and then what happens afterward? We lose it. You go to a leadership program, and you get busy with other things.
Really excited about it.
Really,
and then get home and you get home to your 7,000 emails, and it goes in the top drawer and falls into the abyss.
Well, that's right. The book, the binder, goes on the shelf. Right. So, the technology that I had developed, actually, and I was not a technology person by background, but I was good, not enough to find people who were really good at that. So we developed essentially an e-learning platform to deliver content in small pieces to help people reinforce what they'd learned in a program. And that was the business plan, and the company was called Info Ally. And I started to talk to investors about it, and ultimately, it was May 19th, 2000, we closed on a seed round of funding. And that was a point where I had a decision to make about whether I should leave that job or not. And ultimately, and I won't go into all the detail, I did make a decision to leave. It was a very difficult one because I loved the job that I was in. So I started Info Ally, and our first client became Dale Carnegie, and we developed programs for Dale Carnegie that were used around the world to reinforce the Dale Carnegie course, the sales course, the leadership course. And I worked with Dale Carnegie as a client for many, many years. In 2005, I sold the business, and we had other clients. We had McGraw-Hill and Motorola and Caterpillar, and so we sold the business, and then the people who bought it hired me. They said, basically, we want to buy your company. We want you to be the president of this new company, and the new company was called Asset Health. We actually created two companies, Asset Health, which became and is today a national wellness program, and then Asset Learning, which continued the work that we were doing with Dale Carnegie and so forth, and we ultimately sold that in 2010. So Asset Health, I was the president of that company for 10 years, and we grew that business to one where we were and are today a very significant wellness player in the U.S. So we would work with companies that were 1,000 employees to 80,000 employees. General Motors, Delphi, Johns Hopkins were all clients of Asset Health. And so it was a technology company. It was also a company that was designed to help people become healthier. So through technology, communication, and education. And that's what I was doing. In December of 2014, when someone from Dale Carnegie said, hey, the current CEO has just retired or is retiring, and maybe you should consider applying for this position. And after long some talks with my wife and a lot of kind of discernment, we decided to accept the invitation to get involved in that process. And through a very rigorous, long interview process and psychological tests and all these different things, ultimately I became the CEO of Dale Carnegie. So that was a long story. I hope it's not too long for you, but that's what happened.
No, so let me make sure I understand this. So you're a lawyer. You're happy. That's what you've always wanted to do. You take this program, and then you scratch your own itch, right? To keep yourself accountable, you create this thing, right? Because it wasn't originally created to become what it became.
No, actually, I created this. This is a time when, and you're a young man. I don't know if you remember Franklin planners. Franklin planners were calendars that people would use to plan things out. Yeah. So Franklin planners were really big at that time. Yeah. And so what I originally developed was simply a calendar. I actually created the pages. I'd create them months in advance, where each day I'd work on one Dale Carnegie principle. I'd have one quote that would be there to inspire me, and I would have a little scale that would rank how I did in applying that principle that day. So I started to journal every day. So if the principle is do not criticize, condemn, and complain, I was looking for a way to apply that principle in practice. And then the next week I might work on the next principle, and the next week I would go through the Dale Carnegie principles. And then I would do it over again for the course of a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then I had the idea about really kind of creating software that would enable people to have this kind of calendar, and then that ultimately evolved into the e-learning. Because I talked to a technology person, and I didn't know anything at that time really about the internet. And he said, you really should look at an internet-based version of this. And so one thing led to the next, and that's how it all happened.
It reminds me of something that my co-host for the Off the Top podcast, my other podcast, says, Mark Kinsley. He says that action reveals answers. And that's one of the things he really believes in, and that's what your story is really a demonstration of that, right? That your action revealed answers and opportunities that you had not only did you not plan for, but have gotten you to where you are. That's awesome.
Well, it's interesting too, Doug. Thank you. The Dale Carnegie principles, the application of the principles started to become part of who I was, and they helped me in making the decisions that left. I mean, it was really hard to make a decision at one point to leave the practice of law.
Yeah.
And I started to think to myself, because again, part of what Dale Carnegie is about, it's about the belief in the person. It's about, being bold and taking chances and having confidence. Self-confidence is a huge part of what we teach people. So, and I said to myself, what's the worst that can happen? So I took this real estate job, and that was great. And leaving that, which was, I had one of the best jobs probably of anyone in the real estate business. It was a great, fun job. We were developing shopping malls. I remember one time going to Minnesota with my boss and a couple other colleagues, and we spent half a day going through the Mall of America, because if you're going to build a mall someplace, you have to understand what the competition is.
Yeah.
And my wife would say to me, so you're going and spending the day in a mall and you're getting paid for that? It was, right. It was one dimension of the job, was to understand the market. But to leave that job, which is a good paying job, a great career track, people I loved, work I loved, to start a business from nothing, when at that time, I know I mentioned I've got 6 kids. At that time, I had a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So. And my wife was staying home, and we had really invested. We were investing everything into starting this business. So it was a real gut check time in my life. And then 9/11 happened, and that just made it. It was really a tough time.
So when you go through that much time, energy, and effort to practice law, how did you mentally and emotionally not let the sunk cost thing happen to you? I've put so much money, so much time, so much energy. How did you not let sunk cost sink you?
Yeah. That's a good question, because a lot of my friends, and just to qualify what one thing you said, hey, you're a lawyer, you're happy. Fortunately, I have my demeanor is normally when I'm happy. I'm usually happy in most situations, and at the same time, I wasn't feeling fulfilled in the practice of law. And a lot of other lawyers that I knew at that time were also not feeling fulfilled by the practice of law. And at the same time, we then look at what you said, Doug, which is the sunk cost. You say, gosh, I spent 3 years of my life. I spent a lot of money in law school. I took the bar exam, which was that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Now I've got my practice number, and I can practice. And but the way I looked at it was, I was looking at the future, and I had one image, and the image was of being older and being retired, being in a rocking chair on a porch, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking back to the rest of my life, and I said, do I want to look back and having at what I did in my life and see that this is what I did. When I felt in my heart that maybe there was something else I should be doing.
Legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not, by the way, that there's not something noble about the practice of law. I think it's a great way to serve people and to make a living. It just wasn't really what I had wanted for myself. So
that is absolutely incredible, and I think there's so many times where people allow that sunk costs phenomenon to really sink them and keep them from taking action or trying something. And sometimes it's not so much about just deciding that you're going to jump and then check to see if the parachute's there, but it's scratching your own itch, it's trying things, it's being flexible, and then you never know where that's going to actually end up.
Well, by the way, and I think this concept that you've described of sunk costs, which is right, it's an economic term, and it's a reality in some situations. We create sunk costs in our mind sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't even really exist. I mean,
Right.
we have barriers about why should we not do something, and the fears that go along with it. And, I've already been doing this. It's like, it's almost like we need to have a line and look forward and just to talk to, our future self, if you will, and say, is this, because we've got one life, one chance here, right? And I'm hopeful that there's something beyond this, but in terms of this world right now, this is the shot we've got. So we've got to do everything we can to make it great.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think we have different than previous generations, that there's going to be evidence of the decisions we made to our great grandkids, right? When I think about my great grandfather, I've seen one picture one time, and I wouldn't know him if he would walk past me in the grocery store, right? I've been told that there are like mannerisms, or you're like him in this way, or he was like that, but I don't know that much. But our kids are going to be able to look back at the digital footprint that we're leaving, and we have an opportunity today to impact how they see us. And I think about that a lot when I think about my career and the decisions that I've made. And the decision I'm trying to make is, how will my great grandson and my great granddaughter think about me? And I get an opportunity to leave that legacy, and boy, does that inform and make some of the decisions, like quitting a really good job that I quit to become a Dale Carnegie, full-time with Dale Carnegie. Man, that really informs it in a meaningful way. So,
but what you leave for them then is a legacy of courage, and of taking a chance, because there's a lot of people who, when we lack courage, and that's, just to take a step back, part of what Dale Carnegie believed, as the founder of Dale Carnegie, is that people have greatness, right? People have inherent greatness. And so part of what our programs do is to help people tap into that greatness and to pull it out. And one of the things that impedes that greatness, that holds it back, often is fear, and it's not a realistic fear. It's just a fear that we create in our mind. And whether we call it a sunk cost or it's just that thing that is hard to overcome, that can impede our ability to really live a great life, a life that is filled with opportunity and excitement and joy. And I think what's so important, especially when you talk about legacy or someone else being able to see the decisions you made, it's like, you went for it. And by the way, it might not work. It's going to, in your case, I know it's going to work out. Right. But we don't know when we make a decision.
Maybe not.
When I made a decision to leave a phenomenal job to start a company, I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and I sure had no clue that it was going to lead to the role that I'm in right now, which I couldn't have asked, and my greatest dream couldn't have hoped to be able to lead such an awesome company. I mean, this is, and that's the only reason. Only reason I left, really, and moved my family, 6 kids, to New York, from Michigan, where we're rooted, is because of the great work that Dale Carnegie does. But sometimes we take a leap in faith.
Right.
We take a leap in faith. We don't know what's going to happen, and it works out really well. It always seems to work out really well.
And that happened because you made a calendar.
Well, yeah, it started with that.
It started with the small steps. Speaking of, we've talked a little bit about technology and the digital thing. So when you think about technology and how it's really changed our lives over the years, and really informed the way we communicate, how we take in information, how does a company like Dale Carnegie, 100 plus years, how are you thinking about technology, and how is that impacting how you're seeing the future of not only Dale Carnegie, but also training in general?
Yeah, so the question of technology is an interesting one, because it touches touches so many different parts of our lives, and then we look at the way that we train, and the powerful things that happen in our classrooms are happening in many ways today without technology. So part of what I ask then is, how does technology impact this? How does technology make it better? How does it make it stronger? How do we connect with people before a course experience, during a course experience, after a course experience? How do we help reinforce what happens and so forth? So when I think about Dale Carnegie, I think about an opportunity to take something that has been enduring and proven, that has touched millions of people, and to make it even more relevant and powerful for this generation and the generations moving forward.
Wow, that's incredible. One of the things that my mentor Tom says is that, and I'd like to hear how you think about this. He says the more important digital communication becomes, the more valuable human connection is. So his thesis is kind of like, the more we're not sitting face to face, the more valuable the skill of being able to sit face to face and communicate with other humans. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Tom is right, and I think there's really a couple of dimensions to this. I think that at the one hand, the dependency upon technology can reduce our ability to communicate well when we are in person. And the reality is that we are going to be communicating in person. There's just no way around that. It may be through different modalities, but this goes to something else too. We still need to have human relations principles even when we're connecting through technology. Okay, so there's what happens when I'm in person with someone and what happens when I'm not in person with someone, and how do I still communicate with that people? Because no matter what, whether it's direct or whether it's through technology, it's still a person to a person. And Dale Carnegie talked about how people have a need to feel important, to be appreciated, to be listened to be respected. And so then the question is, well, how do I do that through technology? How do I do that if I'm texting or Snapchatting or on Instagram posting? I mean, so part of what we teach is empathy. Part of what we teach is how to give appreciation and how to do that really in any kind of environment. Mm-hmm. So whether I'm face to face or whether and maybe that's part of what Tom is getting to as well, is that some people are talking about how skills have been degraded because there's less face-to-face interaction. Mm-hmm. And so that is certainly true. And what we do is also very relevant to how people are communicating through whatever the modality is.
So when you think about getting that message out, right? Mr. Carnegie was a master at getting his message out. And I believe that most of that happened because not only was his message true, not only did his message work, but his message had significant impact on applicable impact on the people who interacted with it. And mm-hmm. that's why I believe that I have an opportunity to make a living doing this work, because it works.
Yes.
So with the idea of thought leadership, how are you thinking about continuing the conversation, building on the foundation that we have, and what do you think the future looks like for Dale Carnegie as it pertains to thought leadership?
Yeah, so a number of different questions, right? Let me start with this: that Dale Carnegie was absolutely brilliant, and he was brilliant, and he was well studied, and he had spent years learning and observing how people interact, and really breaking the code, so to speak, mm-hmm. about human interaction. So when we think about an innovator like a Steve Jobs or a Thomas Edison or an Elon Musk, I mean, we can look at those people and see different kinds of things that they created. Dale Carnegie had the same kind of brilliance and the same kind of innovation in understanding how people interact. So and part of the reason I bring that up, Doug, is because even though our company is 105 years old, and even though Dale Carnegie had made these observations that long ago and through the book that was published in 1936 and so forth, we can see even today when we survey people around the world and try to unpack, what leads people to be motivated to give their best, what demotivates people. The research keeps coming back to the same kinds of things. I was watching the 60 Minutes the other night, and you may have seen this mm-hmm. with the founder of Shake Shack, which is a fast-growing. Did you see this? Yeah. Uh-huh. And part of what he said is, one of the jobs of his employees is to see the sign that people have on them, really to understand. He talked about empathy. And I think about that example, or the new CEO of Microsoft, who gave all of his managers, when he became the CEO, a book on empathy. I mean, all of these things point back to principles that Dale Carnegie defined and articulated 105 years ago.
Right.
So the point is that those principles are as relevant, if not more so today than they were then, and they define the thought leadership that we do and what we see. For example, we did a survey in 14 countries of employees, business owners, really trying to understand what are the things that lead you to want to give your best, what motivates you, what demotivates you. And we discerned 4 different traits. And these 4 traits, by the way, maybe coincidentally or not, I mean, point back to different Dale Carnegie principles. And I don't know if you want to go into this.
Yeah, please. I want to hear it.
So the first trait is reliability, and that means that people do what they say and they say what they mean, right? And so there's an internal reliability, which basically means that I'm true to myself, I'm authentic. And to go back to Dale Carnegie talked about anyone can give a great speech.
Right.
Part of what they do is they talk about something they've earned the right to talk about, and then that inner self comes out. And so this concept of reliability in the workplace, or when we interact with people, comes down to the idea that I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. I am who I am, and I'm comfortable with that, and I'm confident about that. And so, but that's something that Dale Carnegie has really defined, that the uniqueness that the person has is what needs to come out, and that's a key factor. There's also external reliability, meaning that people are consistent and they're sincere,
sure,
they're truthful, and so forth. So the R, that first R, stands for reliability. Mm-hmm. Then you've got empathetic, and Dale Carnegie talked about trying to see things from the other person's point of view, listening, letting the other person do a great deal of the talking. Really trying to value the other person and to understand that person's perspective. He quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson in How to Win Friends as saying, every person I meet is my superior in some way, in that I learn from him. And that's what empathy is about. Empathy is about leaders who listen, who care. They're not hierarchical, dictatorial. They're really just trying to. And I'm not talking that people sometimes will ask about, well, does that mean you're gonna? I got to spend all my time asking about the cat or whatever.
Right.
I mean, but it's more just about listening to people and to their perspective and their ideas. You can really kill motivation very quickly just by saying, you know what, Doug, that's great. Just do what I tell you to do. That's not empathetic.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that quote. That quote is actually the quote that changed my understanding of what mentorship was.
Is that right?
It is.
The Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Yep.
How did it do that?
Well, when I was reading How to Win Friends for the first time in college, after my experience with Sarah that I talk about in my TEDx talk, I read that quote and I thought to myself, this guy was one of the greatest, perhaps one of the greatest thinkers of his generation and many other generations. And if he lived with the belief that everyone he met was his superior in some way, and it almost was like early gamification. Like it was almost like he challenged himself to figure out in what way they were superior, and then learn from that. Wow, that feels a lot more like I have some control over my destiny and my development. And it led me to understand that my responsibility was to develop myself, and there was perhaps a reason it was called personal responsibility, because it's not anyone else's responsibility for me to develop and significantly change. So, I credit so much of Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and also the program for the things that have happened in my life. Not only the way that I changed my idea of mentorship, which ended up becoming my TEDx talk and really gave me a platform, but it also gave me the skills to be able to deliver that message, right? And so, everything I can map back to Mr. Carnegie and the investment that was made in me by watching people like yourself, like Tom Brazil and John Faust and other mentors that I've had in the organization that were a demonstration of what it looked like to live by what Ralph Waldo Emerson said. And that really maps back to empathy.
It really does, and it really makes you think about the other person and how can I learn from this person.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's really true. I mean, anyone we meet, anytime, there's something about that person that is special. It doesn't matter who the person is or where the person's been. That person is my superior in some way, and in that I learn of him or her. So the other two letters, just so I don't leave your listeners wondering.
So we've got reliability, we've got empathy.
Yeah, so the third is aspirational. And really what aspirational is about is the idea that we paint a vision for someone that connects to what's important to them. So you think about, I think about this example all the time, just when Steve Jobs was coming up with the iPhone. He probably could have said to people, his team, you know what? We're going to make this really cool phone, and we're going to make so much money. But what I think because anytime he talked about it, he would say something like, we're going to change the world. We're going to change how people communicate. We're going to change how they interact with each other and with information. It's a game changer. And so I think that when you speak in aspirational terms, when leaders speak, and by the way, and all of us have the opportunity to be leaders in whatever we do. But when I'm connecting with someone, how am I aspiring them to something higher? Am I talking just about the financial, just about and I'm pounding on that, or is it something bigger? I was visiting one of our clients in outside of Tampa, Florida, and this is a company that makes workplace signs for the workplace. These are signs to help keep people be safe. And the company has grown significantly. It's very profitable. Revenue's great. But what they talk about, their message to the employees is when one of our customers has our sign, people go home safely that day. Our signs keep people safe. They take moms and dads and they send them home to their kids. Yeah. And so it's a mission-oriented type of thing versus simply saying, okay, we've got a quarterly. I mean, don't get me wrong, the financials are important. And people want more than that.
Is it fair to say that the financials are oftentimes a side effect?
A side effect? When you say a byproduct?
Like they're not the thing. Yeah, they're the financials are a result of the thing. It's Simon Sinek, right? It's Simon Sinek start with why sort of theology. Do you ascribe to that, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think that's true. I think about it even in terms of Dale Carnegie. I mean, clearly, we want and need to be a successful company from a financial standpoint in order to fulfill our mission. And at the same time, the financial side of our business really is a reflection of how many people we touch and about the impact. So we believe we have a mission in the world, and we believe that we're impacting a small percentage of people that we really should be impacting, because what we have is powerful, can change lives and transform people. So our focus is on how do we fulfill that mission? How do we reach people? How do we give people transformational experiences in the classroom? And then really the financial side does follow. It follows in the sense if you're successful with everything else, then you'll be successful financially as well. I think that's really what you mean.
Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so I think about how you've gotten to where you are in your career and the mission that you're on and the mission that you're leading at Dale Carnegie. And when I think about participants that come through that program, we start with a breakthrough plan, right? We work on 5 key drivers: self-confidence, leadership, communication, people skills, and the ability to reduce stress and improve attitude. And I believe that the reason why we focus on those 5 drivers are those are 5 foundational skills, and a skill isn't something that you necessarily have. It's something that you develop over time. And so how has that happened for you? What have been some of the key areas and I guess the key people who have helped you get to that place?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, I've got to go back and finish the thought.
Oh, I've got one more, don't I?
You've got one more.
Okay, give me the last one.
The whole point is that this research, because you're asking about thought leadership, leads to, it's an acronym which is REAL, R-E-A-L. And so right now I've only given you RIA.
That's right.
And so what I want to give is your listeners something that they can remember really easily, which is, reliable, empathetic, aspirational, and then learning. Because this is one of the most important things, is to be an adaptive learner. And it goes to what you said to me earlier. You were talking about, gosh, I just want to learn more, and how do I get better? And I was on this mission about personal growth, and so that is something the best leaders. I think about Warren Buffett as an example of someone who says that he spends 80% of his time reading, learning, listening, so that he can have better judgment. And so that's something I'm saying, gosh, if someone has attained his level in life and with the things he's succeeded at, and he's saying, I got to focus on Dale Carnegie said the same thing. Dale Carnegie would say, of all the things I know that there's so much more that I don't know. So learning is a power, and the desire to learn and be open to learning and to be open to the feedback around us, because that really can guide us. So
and that acronym came out of the research.
That came out of the research. That's right. So we looked at all of the data. The research team looked at all of the data and identified certain traits that said that the greatest leaders, will embody and maybe someone doesn't embody all four.
Sure.
Maybe someone embodies some more than others. So, but if someone who does those things has the potential to truly catalyze growth, to connect with people, and to achieve great things.
As I look at that acronym, reliable, empathetic, aspirational, and learning, I think about the people that I've come across in my life that I was willing to follow, that I was willing to want to be led by or to be mentored by. I can't think of one that did not embody those things. I can think of a lot of people that I did not want to follow or that I did not want to be mentored by that didn't have those things. I can't think of any that I wanted to follow that didn't. That's really interesting.
Well, and it's a guidepost for us.
Yeah.
Because especially for you to say, gosh, I think about the people I've really enjoyed working with. They've got these things. They are empathetic. They are real. I can count on them. I'm not going to worry that they're going to tell me one thing and go do another. Now, we've also worked with people probably who embody the opposite. Say, I don't want to do that. So this is an easy, REAL is an easy way for us to think about when we're working with people, engaging people. It could be, our own family. It could be people in our community. It doesn't have to be people at work. But these are powerful things to help us build stronger connection with the people with whom we come into contact.
And it's amazing how it maps back directly to what Mr. Carnegie wrote about and the program that he created.
It does. These things link to principles. If you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Right. That's something that came out of the data that is a real driver for people, and that also links to people who are reliable or open to say, you know what, I made a mistake, or they're learning. Warren Buffett lost a lot of money on a investment in a company, I think it was called Tesco. And he said, you know what, I made a mistake here. You just called it. But a person who's an adaptive learner is prepared to say, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, and it's funny. I believe that people connect with people through their vulnerabilities oftentimes more than their victories. Right? And the people that I'm most willing to follow are the people that will raise their hand and say, I don't know everything. And it's the people that say or act as if they know everything. We know that's not true, and so do they. But it's funny how it can still be difficult, right? It's a skill, and until you've demonstrated that skill or you've practiced that skill to the point where you understand what the return on investment is for you, you look at these just like, of course, like. We spent money on research to figure out that people need to be empathetic and reliable and aspirational, and they need to learn.
We did, and in 14 countries. But this is part of what's interesting. Part of the reason we did it in 14 countries. We know that the Dale Carnegie principles are powerful. We know that they are enduring and tried and true.
Yeah.
What we wanted to see, though, was for people to tell us. In different cultures, different languages, you've got people in North America, Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia. and they're all saying the same thing. I mean, there's some variations about what some things that drive people more than others. And at the heart of it, these things are there. And at the heart of it, the Dale Carnegie principles are there. So these things can be transformational to people, to businesses, to organizations, to communities.
So let's talk for a moment about people that have come through your life that have been real, who have embodied these things. The people you've thought about as your mentors or your coaches. Share with us some of that.
Yeah, I would share that the most influential person, and the person that I have been most grateful probably to call a mentor, and there are many, many wonderful people I've had the blessing to work with throughout my life. This person is the former CEO of Ford and of Boeing. He came to Ford Motor Company in 2006 at a time when the company was on a path for bankruptcy. He came to that company having already saved Boeing right after 9/11. I mean, that's a company that was also going out of business. And so he had unbelievable interpersonal skills, really a man who embodies what it is to be real. His name is Alan Mullally. And I've gotten to know him over the last year and a half. And he's taken a great interest in Dale Carnegie and in me. And I'm just fortunate for his generosity of actually taking me under the wing and teaching me. And just because here's a man who led a Fortune 20 company to Fortune 50 companies, and and part of what I'm trying to do is to transform Dale Carnegie, to take Dale Carnegie to an entirely different place. And so to be able to work with and talk to Alan has been impressive.
Why do you think he was willing to do that?
So Alan has a real connection to Dale Carnegie. As a young man, his, I think, dad or mom gave him How to Win Friends and Influence People. As many young kids will get a book like that from their parents, and they'll say, "All right, Mom, thanks," or "Dad,"
right.
And maybe they'll skim it or he devoured it. He told me that he read it and he read it over and he highlighted it and he, dog-eared the pages and he really internalized it. And he felt as though Dale Carnegie was a really critical part of his success, his growth, to become, one of the most successful business leaders maybe of all time. And so, but he has a strong connection to Dale Carnegie and a belief in what we do.
Interesting. Where else has that shown up for you? Because, what would you say, because I'm sure there's people listening like, I would take that if he was willing to mentor me. Of course, like who wouldn't want to be, right? So what would you say to people that would say, I don't have an Alan that's accomplished all of these things, that's willing, or that where I have access? What would you say to them, and what's perhaps the first step to developing a mentorship relationship?
So it's interesting you ask, because mentorship, and I know you believe this, and you said this earlier, and I agree with you, can come through many forms. One form is through a person who I can have an interaction with. Another form, and frankly, you can. I've been mentored by books and tapes and courses, like the Dale Carnegie course is a form of mentorship. The people I met in that program. I will tell you though, if someone is looking for a person, there are opportunities. First of all, going back to what we talked about. Every person is my superior in some way. So if I could find someone who is my superior in a way that's important to me, I can learn from that person. I'll tell you, though, when I was younger, the way that I transitioned out of law to business, I learned from a friend of mine. What he had done was he was a lawyer, and he wanted to go into business, and he had identified great leaders, and he would research them extensively, and he'd send them a very personal letter about how important they were, how influential they were to him, and it was very specific. And he would ask for a meeting, and and more often than not, they would say yes. Wow. And he was meeting with just incredible people. And at the end of the conversation, he would say something like, "Do you mind if I, call you back if we got questions?" They always would. Or he might ask them, "Is there someone else that you think I should be, talking with?" And he might introduce them to somebody else. So he met with Michael Eisner at Disney and all these, just top people, and ultimately met someone who led him to he became working with Eli Broad at Sun America, this friend of mine. So he encouraged me to do the same thing, which I did. And I started to write letters. And there were great people in the Detroit area where I grew up who were, very, very successful, very accomplished, with whom I met. So anyone, and Dale Carnegie did this. Dale Carnegie talks about this on How to Win Friends, about a young boy who wrote letters to great leaders, and and talking about why he admired them, and they were willing. So I think people have a desire in their heart to help. If someone wants a mentor, I don't think it's hard to get one.
Yeah, it's one of the things I said in my TEDx talk, which I talked about the number 0, which was before I started talking about the mentors, because 0 is one of the most important numbers to know about, because it's the percentage of responsibility that mentors and every other human being on the planet has for your personal development. Right? Absolutely none.
That's true. That's a good point.
And it's interesting what you said, that essentially what you said is that you went first. You started doing your work. And I believe, and this is my story as well, that my mentors have always been attracted to me after I was doing my work, never before. For the most of my adolescence and young adult life, I didn't have very many mentors because I wasn't doing anything that looked ROI, that made a mentor look at me and say, my time would be ROI positive in that person. And then when that switched, it was like my opportunity to have mentors completely changed. But it was always because I was going first. And that's really the essence of leadership, is the willingness and the ability and the courage to be first.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. This has been a absolute honor and a privilege to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
And for the time we've spent together, I feel like I know you better than perhaps we actually know each other just because of social media.
Yeah, we're connected on Facebook.
We are.
So
we are. And I will to compliment you. I'd like to compliment you on how open and out there you are on social media. I know that as a CEO of a company that's doing the things that Dale Carnegie is, it's not easy to remember to post things or to show what's going on. But as a person who loves to have an understanding of what's actually happening with the organization, being able to see your journey through that has, I think is something that I admire a great deal. And more than anything, thank you for being real.
Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. And thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
This was so good, I think it deserves a high five.
All right.
Thank you.
You got it.